Well, my first session today is how they journeyed. And if you remember in the Torah, the Lord had them write every single stop they made over the 40 years, which tells us God likes to scrapbook. Okay? He's excited about the journey just as much as we. It's all about the journey. It's more than just one event. We have to look at life as a journey. So today's lesson, I'm going to show you how the redemption is tied to how they journeyed. So we're going to begin. And again, those of you that haven't heard me before and those that have know I talk real fast. But I also use all scripture because I really believe people want to hear what God has to say more than what I have to say. And I'm more like the little kid with the connect the dots from 1 to 100. And then after I connect them, I see this picture. Well, it's the same thing. I love to pull the verses together that make the connections and then look at it. And it's like, wow, this is unbelievable. A verse by itself may not be that interesting. But when you connect it to the other verses, it's like looking at things with the 3D glasses on at the movie and things start popping out. One thing I've learned, how many of you know the Bible says we see through a glass darkly? We only know in part, right? But when you go back and look at Romans 11, it says Israel, the Jewish people, were also only blinded in part. Okay, so they're seeing out of one lens, we're seeing out of the other lens, and the first group to humble themselves and put on both lenses gets to see the clear picture. And this is why we need to, just like husbands need the wife's perspective, and the wives need the husband's perspective. It's the same thing when studying the Bible. We can't just disparage or disregard the other person's perspective. I tell people, I know how to eat chicken. I can eat the meat and throw out the bone. Well, there's bones in Christianity, there's bones in Judaism, but I'm not going to turn down a big T-bone steak because there's a bone in it, you know. So let's begin with Numbers, if you want to write this down. This is the book of Numbers, chapter 1, and we're going to look at verse 1 through 3. And the Lord is speaking to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai, and it says it was on the first day. You're going to find almost every prophecy, every event always happens at the new moon. It's always on the first day of a month or on a feast day. But here's the first day of the second month in the second year. So if you remember, the first month of the first year, they're in Egypt putting the blood on the doorposts, right? And so then they head over to Sinai and they celebrate the first Pentecost. The Jews were the first Pentecostals, guys. And on Mount Sinai in the third month, the month of Sivan. And then a year goes by of rest where they're resting for a whole year. And they celebrate Passover for the first time in the wilderness that second year. And now it's a month later. And so we find it's the first day of the second month in the second year. And they want to go take the promised land. So God says, okay, we got to get organized. If we're going to be an army, we got to get organized. And he says, here's what I want you to do. I want you to count everyone who is 20 years old and upward, all that are able to go to war. All right. So you can go ahead and put up my first slide if it's not up. I want to make sure. Can everyone see that first slide? Okay. So here we have, this is how they camped around the tabernacle. And they're ready to go to battle. And God is, the first draft started at the age of 20. And so I wanted you to notice here that what this reminds me of, I don't know how many of you have ever done a play or something and how, or a concert, and you're part of the team and everything, all the rattling and the sounds, everybody's getting together, ready to start the big event. Well, I can just imagine it's time to go to war. And you can just see all of the tribes surrounding on the tabernacle. They're all getting ready. They're getting ready to break camp. And it's the excitement of what is about to happen. Well, look how that also resembles the 144,000 in the book of Revelation. Okay, you have 12,000 from each tribe. And they're ready to go to war. So you see a parallel between the Torah and the book of Revelation here. So now we're going to jump to Numbers chapter 9. And this is verse 17 and 18. And it says that when the cloud was taken up from the tabernacle, that is when the children of Israel journeyed. And wherever the cloud rested, That's where Israel pitched their tents. And then it says this, it was only at the commandment of the Lord that the children of Israel journeyed, and at the commandment of the Lord they pitched their tents. As long as the cloud rested, they rested. Everyone's got that, right? Okay, so we're here at 1500 BC, roughly, about 1500 BC. And listen to Exodus. This is chapter 12, verse 2. This is the first commandment given to Israel while they were still in Egypt. They hadn't left yet. And it says, the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, this month will be unto you the beginning of months. It will be the first month of the year to you. Now, does anyone remember what that name of that first month was? Nisan. That's when Passover is. So God said, okay, we're going to make this month be the first month. And then it gives them marching orders. So let's go back to Numbers 10. This is verse 14 through 16. And it says, in the very first place, when they were going to go to war or when they were going to march, it says, was the children of Judah, according to their armies. And it mentions that over his host was Nachshon. Now, do you know why Nachshon got to go first before any of the other tribes and why he was picked to go first? It's because he was the first one to jump in the Red Sea when Moses raised his rod. Okay, so here, Nachshon, he gets to be in the first place of the tribe of Judah. And then it says, after him went Issachar, and then went Zebulun. All right, so I want you to notice here that on the chart here, you see Judah, it says number 1. Does everybody see that? Judah went first, and then you'll notice I have the number 2 by Issachar because they went second. Zebulun was third. So the camp, those that were camped on the east side would go first. And then, because you want to be organized when you're breaking camp, then the southern side went. Reuben was in charge of the southern side. So Reuben would go fourth, and then Simeon would be fifth, Gad would be sixth, and then we go to the west. And on the west, we have Ephraim, and then Manasseh, and then Benjamin, and then we go to the north where Dan is number 10, Asher is number 11, and then Naphtali is number 12. So we see that Nisan would go first. That's because every tribe is assigned a month. And so just as the months are in order, so were the tribes. So Issachar is the second month of Iyar. Zebulun is assigned to the month of Sivan. And then Reuben is the month of Tammuz. That's where we're in right now. We're in summer, and we're at the month of Tammuz. And Reuben is on the south. Okay, then is the month of Av, and followed by the month of Elul. Well, guess what? Ephraim is the tribe that's assigned to the feast of the 7th month, Tishri, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, okay, the Feast of Tabernacles. That month belongs to Ephraim. And then Heshvan, that's when the flood took place, is Manasseh. Kislev, that's Hanukkah, tied to Benjamin. Dan is the month of Tevet, Asher is Shavat, and Naphtali is Adar. So right here, this shows you how you have to understand every month is assigned to a tribe. And if you go to our website every month, I talk about the relationship of the tribe to that particular month. We have a whole year recorded. It's all free. You can go and you can. All right. So does everyone understand how every tribe is assigned a month? Okay. So now we're going to look at Numbers chapter 10, verse 33 and 34. They're setting forward. Okay, they're ready to go. And they've rested a whole year. And now they're packed their bags, they're ready to go. And it says, they set forward from the mount of the Lord on a 3-day journey. It almost sounds like a 3-hour tour. Because guess what? It was a 3-day tour and they got lost. Okay. And it says, the Ark of the Covenant went before them 3 days' journey to seek out a resting place. And the cloud was over them by day when they set forward the camp. Okay, here comes verse 35 and verse 36. It says this: whenever the ark set out, which means they're journeying, they've been resting, this is the beginning of the journey, that Moses said, and here comes verse 35 and 36, which you do not see this in English. I'm so sorry, they don't translate things correctly. There is an anomaly in every Hebrew Bible that sets this verse apart. Like in English, we would put a parenthesis around something to set it apart. That happens here in the Hebrew, and it's missed. And as a matter of fact, they say it's almost like it represents a whole other book of the Torah. It is so important. It's so significant. And here's what it says. This is verses 35 and 36. It says in English, "Rise up, O Lord, let your enemies be scattered, may your foes flee before you." And whenever it came to rest, he said, "Return, O Lord, to the countless thousands of Israel." Okay, so what has been going on now historically at this time? The tabernacle has been built. It's been dedicated. The priests have all been instructed about what their duties are. And we've read about the counting of the children of Israel, the procession of the camp, and how, think about this, each tribe had a flag. So you can imagine, just like in a military battle, they've got their flags. They're all ready to go to war. They're organized. They're ready to march. And in fact, these verses symbolize the marching orders. This is their military marching orders when they journey. And we know they only travel when the cloud is lifted up. Okay, with that said, here we go. Guess what? What we have here is like two dead fish in Hebrew that is surrounding these verses. Here it is in an actual Kamash. You'll see the two upside down letter nuns. Does everyone see the two upside down letters? Let me put the fish on them. Right there. Okay? This is in every Torah scroll, and it is in every Hebrew Bible, but we don't get it in ours. We've been robbed. All right? Well, there's something that is very significant about this verse. And here is why. First off, here's the letter nun. You can see it, but where it looks like the letter N, which is, it's our N. We got our modern N. If you pull that down, you can see the letter N. All right. The nun represents fish. In Aramaic, it means fish. But it means more than just fish. It means a fish that is alive. It's like these fish are just hopping. So it represents life. But the problem is, what we have here is not a fish that is alive jumping out of the water. We have dead fish upside down and backwards. So what in the world was God trying to tell us with these particular verses? Well, if you remember, the ark went on a 3-day journey. Guess what? Yeshua went on a 3-day journey, and he rose from the dead, which is why this verse begins with "Rise up, O Lord," speaking of the resurrection of the Messiah after 3 days. And when it says "Return, O Lord," it's speaking of his second coming and our resurrection from the dead. And so what's fascinating about this, we see the resurrection tied to the very section of how they journeyed. It's symbolic of that. And this is why we have the fish as our symbol in Christianity. I mean, this is just amazing. And here's the other thing. This letter nun is very significant. I have the Hebrew alphabet here, and I want you to notice the letter nun is the 14th letter, okay, of the 22 letters. Now, I want to point something out here as well. Do you see the 4th letter is the Dalet, which is our letter D. The 6th letter is the Vav. And so guess what? How many of you ever heard of King David? All right. Well, David's name is a D, a V, and a D. And so David's name is 14. And the 14th letter, we know, is the letter noon as well. And so what's fascinating about this as well, listen to this. Well, let me summarize by saying here's the letter noon, represents fish. But it also is the 14th letter, and it represents King David because the numerical value of David's name, but it also represents Yeshua reigning on King David's throne. And listen to this. What is the numerical value of David's name? So now we understand better in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 1, verse 17. It says, all the generations from Abraham to David are 14 generations. From David to the exiles, 14 generations. From the carrying away of Babylon to the Messiah, the son of David, it's 14 generations. When a Jew reads that verse, he goes, David, David, David. He sees the 14 saying, this is the Messiah, the son of David. But if we don't know David's name is numerically 14, we don't see this in Matthew 1:17. He's saying the Messiah has arrived. Okay, now, so I've got this army with all the flags. Can you imagine what it's going to be like when we're on the horses ready to come back with the Messiah? I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm excited about that. I can't ride a horse, but I'll learn. Listen to this. I got to see how much time I have. Okay. The life of the journeys of Israel is tied to both going forth into battle and to the resurrection. So I'm going to bring out another book that I'm teaching on right now. If you follow us on Saturday mornings at 10, I'm teaching on the Song of Songs, which I believe is totally misunderstood. And we're looking at it from a whole nother perspective. But listen to this. This is Song of Songs, chapter 6, verse 4. The bridegroom is speaking to the bride. And he says, you are so beautiful, O my love, as Tirzah. You are as fair as Jerusalem. You are to be feared like an army with flags. So we're to be, this is the bride. Sometimes we don't feel like we're too fearsome. But God says you are to be feared like an army with flags. You're ready to go into battle. Now, we don't want to repeat the same mistakes Israel made when they were ready to go to battle into the promised land, because everything's been written for an example, right? So realize we are going to be like an army bearing flags. Now, listen to verse 10. Who is she? Now, this is the daughters of Jerusalem speaking, because now they see her assembled with these flags. And they go, who is she that looks forth as the morning, fair as the moon, clear as the sun, and terrible as an army with banners? So here we see tied to the army is the sun and the moon are like the flags. That what's interesting, that word there in Hebrew refers to flaunt, to be conspicuous. Well, I tell you what, if you want to be stealth, you don't want to be conspicuous. But God's army is flying the flag in your face. Here we are and here we come. Okay? I mean, you can imagine people trembling in their boots. Well, I can't think of anything that is more conspicuous than the sun and the moon and eclipses, because everybody knows an eclipse. It speaks in every tribe, nation, and tongue. And so that's why God says he's going to use signs in the heavens, so it is conspicuous what is going to be happening.
Thank you so much for supporting our ministry. If this has blessed you, please say a prayer for us And if you would like to give, we have 3 ways that you can do that. You can give online at isow.org/donate, or text the word GIVE and the amount to 423-225-9022. That's 423-225-9022. You can also give through the mail at ISOW, 340 Paul Huff Parkway, Northwest, Cleveland, Tennessee, 37312. Thank you. God bless you, and may the Lord multiply your seed. Now back to this teaching from the International School of the Word.
And then listen to verse 13. And again, this is tied right to what we just read, those special 2 verses in Numbers. Listen to what they say now. Return, return, O Shulamite. Return, return, that we may look upon you. And so it's like, oh my goodness, she's gone. And then listen to what the bride says. She's humble. She's not full of pride. She goes, well, what do you see in the Shulamite? What do you see in me? And they respond back, we see the company of 2 armies. Wow! What do you remember from Genesis chapter 32, verse 1 and 2, when Jacob goes on his way, he's got to return to the land. He's afraid of Esau. And it says the angels of God met him. And when Jacob saw them, he says, this is God's army. And he called the name of that place Mahanaim, which means 2 armies. That's what Mahanaim means. It's like the host of Israel, the army of Israel, and God's armies. Well, listen to 1 Chronicles. Many of you are familiar with this verse. Chapter 14, verse 13 through 15. It says, and the Philistines yet again spread themselves abroad in the valley. Therefore, David, he's inquiring again of God. Okay, he wants to know what direction he's supposed to go. And God said, don't go up, turn away, and come upon them over against the mulberry trees. And it will be when you hear a sound of going in the tops of the mulberry trees, then you shall go out to battle, because God's army is going out before you to smite the host of the Philistines. 2 armies. This is the problem of us in God's army wanting to go out on our own direction and journey when we're not supposed to journey. God says, let me do the battling. You're my kid. I'll let you take the credit, but I'm the one who's going to be doing it. You can have the fun of being participating. It's kind of like a bicycle built for 2, and we think we're doing all the pedaling when Dad is the one that's doing all the pedaling at the front of the bicycle. Listen to Isaiah. This is chapter 13, verse 1 through 8. How many of you know Isaiah talks about the last times, the end times, the last days? It says, the burden of Babylon, which Isaiah, the son of Amos, saw. And listen to what he says. Lift up a banner. In other words, make this conspicuous upon the high mountain. In other words, go to the highest point and then lift a banner. Exalt the voice to them. In other words, be yelling out to them. Shake your hands. Okay, you're making yourself conspicuous. That they may go to the gates of the nobles. And then God says, I have commanded my sanctified ones. I've also called my mighty ones because of my anger, even those who are rejoicing in my highness. And then you can just hear the battle getting ready to come together. It says there's a noise of a multitude in the mountains, like as of a great people, a tumultuous noise of the kingdoms of the nations gathered together. Can you imagine? All the nations are getting ready to go to war. They're all mustering to battle. You can hear the clanging of the swords and the shields, and everyone's coming. And it says, they come from a far country, from the end of heaven. I mean, we have to understand, Moses' tabernacle is patterned after the one in the heavenlies. Everything that's happening on earth is patterned after what's going on in heaven. So no, as we're battling on earth, there's battles that are going on in the heavens. Do you remember when Daniel was trying to fast and pray, and the messenger of the Lord came and says, ever since you started, I've been wanting to come, but the prince of Persia I've been battling with. Okay, these are things that we have to understand are going on in the heavenlies as well as here. And it says, they come from a far country, from the end of heaven, even the Lord and the weapons of his indignation to destroy the whole land. And then it says, how? Because the day of the Lord is at hand. Now, when it says the day of the Lord, this is talking about the big day of the Lord. And many people don't understand this verse in Revelation where John says, I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day. That had nothing to do with anything as far as the days of the week. The Lord's day he's talking about is the day of the Lord. That's what he was talking about there. And then listen to this. It will come as destruction from the Almighty. Therefore, all hands will be faint. Every man's heart is going to melt. They're going to be afraid. And here comes the key verse you're all familiar with. Pangs and sorrow will take a hold of them. They'll be in pain as a woman that travails in childbirth. So we know he's talking about the tribulation. We know he's talking about the day of the Lord here, right? And it says they're going to be amazed at one another, and their faces will be on fire. Their faces will be as flames. And then listen to what the next very verse says. This is Isaiah chapter 13. We're going to look at verse 9 through 11. Behold, the day of the Lord comes. It's cruel with wrath and fierce anger to lay the land desolate, and it's going to destroy the sinners out of it. And then guess what? The day of the Lord here, it goes back to acknowledging the sun, the moon, the stars. It says the stars of heaven and the constellations will not give their light. The sun will be darkened in his going forth. The moon shall not cause her light to shine. I will punish the world for their evil, the wicked for their iniquity. And then here it comes. I will cause the arrogancy of the proud to cease and lay low the haughtiness of the terrible. Okay, so here we have the heavenly host. I mean, can you imagine? They're all in the heavenlies, ready to come to battle. But now I want to point something out. How many of you know there was a contention between Rachel and Leah? A little bit of tension there, right? Well, I have under the tribe of Judah here, Leah's name. Okay? Leah was the mother of Judah. Rachel was the mother of Ephraim. Okay? Joseph had grandmother. Joseph, I'm just saying her line. Okay, so if you remember, Israel was a divided nation. Okay? Ephraim was to the north. Judah was to the south. And remember, God in Ezekiel wants the two sticks to come together? Everyone familiar with that? Well, watch this. Zilpah, Leah's handmaid, is the tribe of Naphtali. Gad is from Bilhah, okay? And she was the handmaid of Rachel. So you have Leah and Rachel, two of Jacob's wives, and then you have Zilpah and Bilhah, two of Jacob's wives that all make up the house of Israel. All right, I've laid the foundation. We're now going to do shock and awe. I have to set the foundation first so you can understand how they journeyed is tied to the resurrection. and how every single tribe was assigned a month. So let's take a look. Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel. If we remember how they journeyed, who goes first? East as a direction. East goes first. And on the east, Judah, who's assigned the month of Nisan, they went first, followed by Issachar, which is the second month, Iyar. Zebulun, which is Sivan. Okay, then came south, which I have on the bottom underneath. They were the second group to travel. And so on this slide, I give you the names of each tribe with their month and how they journeyed. So we have Reuben, the month of Tammuz, Simeon, Av. Now, remember I pointed out Gad and Naphtali? Okay, so Gad is the handmaid Zilpah, who is the sixth one. Well, watch this. Look who's on the west. You have Ephraim, which is Tishri, followed by Manasseh, who's Heshbon, Benjamin, Kislev, and then you go to the north. So you can see how organized everything is. Dan with Tevet, Asher with Shavat, Naphtali with Adar. Now, what I think is interesting is Judah goes first and Nisan goes first on the religious calendar. But Rachel can say, yeah, well, I'm first on the civil calendar. I get to go first. I have all the feast in my month. So God is trying to, find a little balance here. You both can feel you're first. You're first on the religious calendar. You're first on the civil calendar. Now, if you remember, who is last is Gad under Leah's side, and who is last under Rachel's side is Naphtali, which is the month of Adar. Now watch how this goes. On the east were all of Leah's kids. To the south is Leah's kids and her handmaid Zilpah. Then we come over, Asher was also Zilpah. But then we have Rachel goes first with her kids on the west. Bilhah then, who is Rachel's handmaid, are on the north. And so what is happening here is God wants the two sticks to come together. He wants Leah to get along with Rachel, Zilpah to get along with Bilhah. How many of you know God wants unity? Yes. That's what he wants. Drum roll. Yeah, there we go. Watch this. If you remember, and in my book on the four blood moons, I talked about how there were these four blood moons back in 2014, 2015, which now if you were there at the other session, how important that Shemitah year is in the first year of a new Shemitah cycle. That's when these blood moons occurred with the solar eclipses. We talked about the solar eclipse that came in 2016, 2017. Do you remember that? Well, then now here's where we are with the red arrow. We're right there. We are about to enter the 7th year of a Shemitah cycle. And we know it's the Shemitah year because the Hebrew year is divided by 7. Okay? Simple. Now, next year begins it. Well, then what happens? We have that total solar eclipse that goes over Little Egypt I talked about. Okay? In 2024. What's interesting about, and also for those that maybe weren't here or weren't watching, the tribulation, is 7 years. Daniel was Jewish. Daniel's even from the tribe of Judah. And the whole reason they were in Babylon for 70 years was because they weren't following the Shemitah cycle and releasing everyone the 7th year. That's why they had to be there for 70 years. So when Daniel talks about there's 1 week left, he's talking about a Shemitah week. Therefore, the tribulation cannot start any day. It cannot start in a year. The first year of the tribulation has to be the first year of a Shemitah cycle. Well, guess what? Next year starts a Shemitah cycle. If the tribulation does not start next year, it cannot start until 2029. And if it doesn't start then, it can't start till 2036. So this is telling us these next 2 cycles are very significant. How many of you believe we're close? I'm telling you, we're real close. Look how fast Y2K's gone by. And that's been 20 years ago. Well, we're talking about just 14 years as a possibility. Okay, well, what's interesting is at the end of this Shemitah cycle is when Apophis is supposed to hit. Which reminds me of Daniel's vision of the rock that hit the image and tore down the image, which I thought was kind of fascinating. Okay, here we go. Here again are the dates of the solar eclipses and the dates of the lunar eclipses that we find that are happening right in the middle of this next Shemitah cycle, 24, 25, 26. Now, when you see that, what do you think? They're dates. But this is why it's important to put on your Torah hat, Jewish hat perspective. Those dates mean something completely different to me. And I will explain. April 8th represents Judah. September 18th represents Gad. Then Ephraim, Naphtali, Judah, Gad, Ephraim, Naphtali. Okay? And here's the reason why. Do you know these dates, April 8th, that first solar eclipse that happens in 2024, which is April 8th, it's Nisan 1. Nisan 1 is assigned to Judah, right? Okay, well, guess what? Nisan 1 is the day the glory fell on Moses' tabernacle. That was the day of the grand opening ceremony. Nisan 1 is very significant. And well, guess what? October 2nd, that same year, is Rosh Hashanah. It's Tishri 1. That's why it's given to Ephraim. March 29th is Nisan 1 again. September 21st is Rosh Hashanah again. Okay, so let's watch something here. Here I have the calendar for the next Shemitah cycle, the next 7 years. And I'm bringing out the eclipses. The solar eclipses, like I said, Nisan 1, Rosh Hashanah. Nisan 1, Rosh Hashanah. Well, guess what? The 4 lunar eclipses is Elul 15. That's 2 weeks before Rosh Hashanah. And then on Purim, if you know anything about the Bible, that's Esther. And then Elul 15 and Purim. So what is God doing? Judah and Ephraim, or Leah and Rachel, and then Gad and Naphtali, or Zilpah and Bilhah. He's bringing all of the 2 sticks together, all 4 wives in this phenomenal flags of the sky, they're all coming together at the same time in that time frame. Now, listen to this. In Hosea, chapter 6, verse 2 through 4, it says, after 2 days, he will revive us. Okay? Now, a day with the Lord is as 1,000 years. And then it says, on the 3rd day, he will raise us up. That's the letter noon, brought back to life, that we may live before him. Let us press on to know the Lord is going out as sure as the dawn. He will come to us as the showers, the spring rains that water the earth. And then listen to what God says, which is again tied to the resurrection here, the 2 days and the 3rd day. God says, what am I going to do with you, Ephraim, and what am I going to do with you, Judah? Your goodness is as a morning cloud, and as the early dew, it goes away. And so here again, he's calling Ephraim and Judah. What is he going to do with them? Bring them together. And then what do we see? The amazing flying flags in the heavens of the sun and the moons that are tied to all the tribes of Israel. So there you go. I'm done here. I'll finish with this little picture here. I showed it the other day. I believe what time it is. It is time in this season for the body of Messiah to wake up and get to work.